So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jacqueline Pitts. I am the Director of Communications at the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. I'm joined today by my co-host, Ashley McCarty, who is the Director of Workforce Recovery at the Kentucky Chamber as well. And we are so excited to be joined by this wonderful panel of businesses from across the state to have such an incredible conversation. All of this is part of our Kentucky Comeback Initiative. If you're not a part of the Kentucky Comeback Network, please go ahead and do so. That's at kentuckycomeback.com. We're really making some incredible changes across the state, and it requires all of you all to be involved. This is also part of Second Chance Month. The month of April is Second Chance Month. So this is such an important conversation to have during this time as well. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with our first question to our panelists. And I will call each of you out. So you will start by you guys introducing yourselves and your companies. But basically, we want to start by talking about each of your organization's kind of culture, especially towards recovery from substance use disorder and reentry. All of you are second chance employers, so we're excited to hear from each of you. Patrick, I'll start with you.
Okay, so my name is Patrick Bryan. I'm the Senior Talent Acquisition Partner for AppHarvest. I'm in charge of greenhouse operations, so I hire for our greenhouses. Currently in Moorhead, we're employing in the neighborhood of about 450 employees in our greenhouse in Moorhead. We are part of the Second Chance program, so we have partnered very closely with EKSEP and other recovery centers throughout Eastern Kentucky, and very open to giving individuals an opportunity to. We know that recovery a lot of times means a good job, a stable place to live. So we believe that, in helping them to find good employment will help them in their recoveries.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. I'll go to you, Tanya. What about you and your company?
My name is Tanya Ayersmith. I'm the HR and Safety Director here at Atkins & Pierce. We are a manufacturing company, currently employ around 240 employees. Being a second chance employer is a good fit for us because our kind of company motto is "We care," which kind of says I set aside my personal agenda to do what's right for each other and for the company. So seemed like a natural fit, and we've been very blessed to have some really great employees.
That's wonderful to hear. I think that this audience has probably seen this face and heard this name quite a few times. Rob Perez, I'll call on you next from DB8 Kitchen.
Yeah, what we specialize in is running a restaurant, trying to show folks in a second chance position how to get a job, keep a job, and get promoted to the exact job that they want. And we focus in on trying to go hand in hand with already pre-existing recovery resources. For example, we hire directly from 7 different residential living facilities so that they could provide us as employers confirmation of drug testing, of program adherence, and that they have a stable home. And so that's what we concentrate on, is trying to be a holistic partner integrated with the community.
Fantastic. And Matt, we will go to you at Toyota Two Show.
All right, well, good morning. My name is Matthew Nunn, or Matt Nunn, either one's fine. VP HR at Toyota Two Show here in Georgetown. People here at Toyota, we are not Toyota Motor Manufacturing here in Georgetown. We do not make Camrys. We're a supplier or a partner company of theirs. Just to give you some scale, they have about 10,000 employees in Georgetown, and we have about 1,500 employees nationwide. So we're a much smaller company. The transformational, we call it our transformational employment program, very, very important to us. We believe, number one, that people deserve a second chance. So it's very important to us from a CSR, corporate social responsibility perspective, but also just as a strategic manpower initiative. We understand that there's a lot of untapped talent there that often is overlooked, and so we want to draw upon that. So we're very intentional about recruiting candidates with these hurdles to employment. So we have some relationships with several entities that help us recruit and identify people, and we also have some wraparound services like a success coach that helps them with that transition. So it's a very important aspect of our overall talent acquisition and management program.
Fantastic. And that leads perfectly into our next question. I will toss it over to my co-host, Ashley McCarty, for our next question for our panelists.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Yeah, I was going to say that leads right into the second question. So I want to know what exactly are your recruiting mechanisms? Like what talent pipelines do you use to tap into what I call this untapped talent pool? So Patrick, we'll go back to you.
Okay, so we have partnered through a lot of the different recovery centers in Eastern Kentucky. And through our applicant tracking system, they have direct access. So anybody in a recovery center can apply directly online into, and it identifies them as an individual in one of these programs. And once that person comes into our applicant tracking system and is recognized as someone in these programs, it notifies us through our inbox in our email that this is someone from the programs. And they also, when they apply online, we know a lot of these individuals may not have an updated resume. They're not sure on the application process. So we also have success coaches and have trained the individuals at the recovery centers on how to help the employees apply online.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for what you do, Patrick.
No problem.
I'm going to pass it on to you. I think you're next.
We're not quite as advanced as Patrick. We're probably newer in this endeavor to have community partners, but we've been partnered with the Life Learning Center. And if you've never been there, you have to get a tour. It's fabulous. But we've been partnered with them for probably about 8 months now, and had some really good success, had some not so good success. But the great thing about having a partner like them is we learn from it. They learn what kind of people are good fits for us. So it's been very educational for me as well as for the Life Learning Center in what type of candidates work well in our environment.
Thank you, Tanya. And I agree. You have to tour the Life Learning Center. It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's a really cool process.
Okay. Rob, you said that you partnered with about 7 different treatment centers. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what we do is when we have a candidate, when we need a candidate, we contact 7 different residential living facilities and ask for them to pass along the best applicant at the time. We feel like they can better assess where their people are in terms of accepting a job, and the job that we offer, they can kind of qualify. But the reality of this whole thing is that it's a super important step to realize that when they come in, they don't feel uncomfortable about talking about their recovery and what they have to do. And so I think it's a perfect opportunity because this is exactly where we believe people need the most help. And coincidentally, when we do it early in their tenure at the house, we feel like we get the best opportunity to make a difference and have a better employee. So as opposed to some of our thoughts initially that we should take 6 months while they're in, after 6 months they can come and work with us, it really feels like after 30 days, it's a perfect time to get the candidates from the residential living facilities. So it's just kind of an interesting counterintuitive thing.
All right. Thank you, Robin. I agree with you. As a person in long-term recovery, having the culture where you can openly talk about that is so important. So thank you. Matt, I'll go to you next.
So yeah, we're recruiting from a variety of places. So we have a relationship with the Bluegrass Area Development District in Lexington. They're really the first person or entity that we partnered with our program, and they introduced us to some others. And so much like Mr. Perez, we're working with several recovery centers, Isaiah House being the primary one in Lexington. And then a couple of homeless centers, the New Life Day Center in Lexington and the Gathering Place here in Georgetown. All of those entities provide us with candidates. And we tend to, when we get a candidate from like Isaiah House or New Life, we'll direct those people to the Bluegrass Area District because there are some wraparound services that they can then provide to help them be more successful. And one thing I'll say, and maybe we'll talk about this later, is just talk about the importance of a success coach. for some of those wraparound services. Maybe that'll come up later.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, I completely agree. Wraparound services are so very important. I'm going to pass it on over to my host, Jacqueline, for the next question.
Thank you. So obviously you guys have done a great job at finding candidates, employing people who need a second chance. But a lot of people don't really know where to start. And especially we have policies in place. There's a lot of barriers that people, especially who are looking for jobs, are worried about, and that's get in the way of businesses as well. We hear about policies like ban the box and things like that, especially when someone has a criminal background, it usually stops them. So how do your companies, and I'm going to ask this of Matthew and Patrick, how do your companies deal with that? So how do you get around some of those barriers? How do you ensure that people are getting a fair shot? And where do you look for the talent pool, basically, outside of some of these recovery centers as well?
Matthew, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can do that, absolutely. Well, I'm fairly happy to say those barriers have really come down at TAI since we've started our program. When we went into this, we had a lot of very skeptical and understandably so managers, both in our HR department for recruiting and then even the people who would ultimately be managing these folks when they come out on the floor. So a lot of apprehension is maybe the best word. But going through this program for almost 2 years now, a lot of those barriers are down to the point that now we are actively seeking candidates coming out of recovery. It's not just like, okay, we would accept this. Now we're being aggressive about doing that, looking for people in recovery or transitioning from incarceration. So again, we're working with those different entities to help us identify people, but then our recruiters know that those are not disqualifying experiences. If they see that, we don't do background checks until an offer is made, typically. But when people do see that or volunteer that in their background, our recruiters know that that is not a disqualifying experience by any means. It means they probably need to introduce that person to some of those wraparound services like our success coach when they do come on board. But that's really all that happens. It's not a disqualifying factor for us.
That's absolutely fantastic to hear, especially to start it up front with the people who are kind of screening the resumes, making sure that they know it's not a disqualifier, especially if someone feels comfortable enough to, kind of disclose that up front. So that's wonderful. Patrick, what about you guys at App Harvest?
Very similar to what Matt said. We have partnered with our community partners. Amy Samples is an employee within App Harvest that has strategically gone out to recovery centers and has partnered with EKSEP. So they're aware of who we are. Same as what Matt said, our recruiters are trained. Every interview that we conduct, whether the person has identified as a second chance employer or is someone, we let them know that we are a second chance employer. So we go through it with every single person because we know maybe somebody's applied and hasn't identified. And so we want them to feel comfortable. We do let them know there is a background check process, but we do explain what a second chance employer is. So they know that up front. And in our application process, there is no questions concerning past criminal activity or convictions in any way, and there's no ban the boxes on any of our applications.
Tanya, what about you at Pierce and Atkins, or Atkins and Pierce? How do you guys approach these type of barriers?
I would kind of agree with Matthew. We don't really consider them barriers. I think if a candidate is willing to talk about their background, that means that they're on the right path. So a lot of times I will just, they'll mark on the application and they might be very vague about it, but I'm pretty candid with them and just say, okay, tell me what you're dealing with. A lot of times if they're coming from LLC, I know that they're referred from there. But to act like none of us have ever made a mistake, these folks just happen to be, sometimes in the wrong place at the wrong time, the wrong crowd. And a lot of that comes out in the conversations where you can see that they're on the right path now. They're doing the right things to move to the next stage of life. So I think just being candid with them and talking about it has made a big difference for us. And we look at the timing and the offense, you have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
I think that's exactly the right approach, and more businesses need to start looking at that. So that's great. And this is exactly why we're having this conversation, so other businesses can learn from you. Now, to Matthew's point, Rob, you kind of, your business model is a little bit different. Obviously, yours is exactly going after the people who do have a background. And so talk a little bit about the way that you kind of deal with those issues as well.
Well, for us, if we're trying to talk to other second chance employers that or businesses considering doing this, I would just say this. If you could just come to the conclusion that you want to help at some level and you determine the entry level in which you want to help, then if you can communicate that somehow to the applicant, and what I think the biggest inflection point is not throwing the application in the not hire folder because they have a gap, because they have incarceration, because there is something that tells you I probably shouldn't include this person because of whatever might have happened in incarceration or addiction. And once you have that opportunity to interview someone, you can make the decision based on their experience, where they are in their recovery, what they've done to try to rebuild their life. But the biggest problem in my mind that we have getting over is just giving that interview, having that opportunity to sit down with someone to allow them to say, this is how I've rebuilt my life, and here's the examples of why you should hire me as a second chance employee.
Mhm.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that at our organization, Ashley McCarty is a fantastic example of that. And she uses her story every day to inspire us and to inspire a lot of you guys I know as well too. So Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. For the next question, I was going to set it up by saying, whenever I was a pharmaceutical sales representative, I had a couple surgeries and got addicted to opioids. That's how my substance use disorders began. And during that time, there were no protocols in place for someone who needs assistance that's struggling within an organization. It was simply swept under the rug, heads were turned, and I eventually lost my career. So my question is, if someone in your organization is struggling with substance use disorder, what protocols do you have in place to get them the help that they need? Patrick, I'll start with you.
All right. So we do have what's called a second chance agreement, and we do have a success coach on staff. So every manager knows of Ryan, our success coach. And so if they feel like that an employee or an employee approaches them and identifies a problem, we put them in contact with our success coach, which will put them in touch with the appropriate resources they need. We do have them sign a second chance agreement and ensure that their position would be held for them once they complete whatever they need to come back into the company.
Great, thank you. And thank you for utilizing the second chance agreements. So just like Patrick said, if an individual is struggling, then it's agreement where they can go to treatment, whether it be inpatient or out, correct? And then their job is there for them once they complete that. So thank you. Tanya, what about you? What protocols do you have in place?
We also have a second chance agreement. We also do training on reasonable suspicion so that the coworkers know what to look for. And the point of that is to hopefully catch it early on to where we can have that employee referred and we can do the second chance versus an accident and then I kind of have no choice. So I think that's important too, that other individuals know what to look for, what signs. But the second chance agreement has worked. I've probably had in the last 16 years, maybe 10. And I'm happy to report 8 of them still work here. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone on the webinar needs to know more about second chance agreements, then you can contact myself because that's what I talk about at the Chamber with the recovery program. And I was also going to add, when we talk about training, I'm glad you brought that up, Tanya, because I'll put a plug in. We also at the Kentucky Chamber have training for employers. And I know Toyota Two Show and App Harvest have both went through that training. They're supervisors and managers, and that's regarding substance use disorder, mental health, and the stigma that surrounds it. So if anyone's interested in that, because Tanya just said how important it is to know the signs and the symptoms, we focus on that as well. So, Matthew, what about you, about protocols you have in place?
Basically the same thing. We have an employee assistance program that our employees can utilize without us even knowing. It's a benefit that's open to them. So if they want to seek counseling or whatever that may be, they absolutely have that at their fingertips. And then we have the second chance type of agreement as well. So if an employee comes to us and says, "Hey, I've got an issue. I've got a substance abuse issue," they can go and seek counseling, and their job is preserved. Or if they tell us before they are required to do a drug screen, they'll volunteer that information, their job is preserved. The only problem is if something happens, they get in an accident and they're required to do a drug screen, and they volunteer it, then it's too late at that point. They've got to be aggressive and tell us beforehand. They got to volunteer the information as opposed to kind of after they get caught. Then we do make a distinction there.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. So as you guys can see on here, second chance agreements are a hot topic. So if you need more information, just let me know. Rob, going to you next. If someone's struggling with substance use disorder or relapse even, what is your protocols that you have set in place?
Yeah, we try to do everything all up front. In our second chance agreement, we have our employees sign at the very beginning that we're going to monitor testing, housing, and program adherence. And that really sets up everything moving forward. We have a protocol for someone that relapses, and it's something like this. If I find out from any other source that you used and you don't have a very good plan to try to kind of arrest the issue that happened, if you don't have a plan and I find out from someone else, you do lose your job. But if you come to me and volunteer and say, "Here's my plan," we'll work with you. We have no issue, but we do that in orientation. We do that right from the very beginning. And so it's a procedure that they can follow. And we're finding that it's pretty successful. I think that of the 8 or 9 relapses we've had, 6 of them came to us first. And that was pretty cool.
Very much.
Thank you, Rob. And I have to say, in order for someone to come forward, that culture, I'm sure you'd agree with me, that culture has to be conducive for them to do so. So we talk about individuals struggling and with substance use disorder and coming forward. If that culture is not in place that's recovery friendly, then speaking from experience, the individuals are not going to come forward and say, "I'm struggling." So that's why the first question that Jacqueline asked is so important about culture. That is one thing that we have to have in place. So thank you for your culture, Rob.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. And like you guys were talking about, there is, when you do become a second chance employer, there is a chance of relapse. There are chances you're taking on people, obviously. And I think more and more companies are open to that. But at the same time, I talked about Kentucky Comeback at the beginning of this call, our program that we're running. As part of that, we're always working to pass important bills and new laws for criminal justice reform. We just passed an employability law where they would come out, someone would come out with a certificate of employability. We're making sure they get an ID when they come out. But in that and in every bill that we've passed on this type of front, there's been liability protections. Because as an employer, liability is so important, especially on this front. So obviously a couple of things have been done on this, but as employers, especially in like manufacturing and some other areas, how does liability play into your thinking as you're hiring people? And what else needs to be done to protect employers who want to be second chance employers? And I'm going to open this up to anybody who wants to start on that one.
I'll just say, I think, again, it goes back to training. I think, we're fortunate to have a recovered employee who is a manager for us on third shift, which is where we hire a lot of our new people. And having him there is so awesome because he knows exactly what they've gone through. He knows what signs to look for. And he's been able to teach our other managers kind of those watch outs. So I think a lot of it goes to training. We're very big on safety, of course, in manufacturing. So that's always a focus at the beginning of every shift. But I think teaching others what to watch out for has been the winning ticket for us.
Patrick, what about you all at App Harvest?
This was the one question I kind of needed to do a little bit more research on. So from a liability standpoint, I mean, any liability protections we have are equal to all of our other employees. So we don't see the need to have an additional liability program for our second chance employers. So, we ensure that, we inform, we train our managers, everyone's aware of who our success coaches are. So we do everything, we can to normalize and to treat our second chance employers exactly the same as we do all of our other employees.
Matthew, any insight from Toyota to show?
Same as Patrick, actually. And, when we sat down and talked about this program again 2 years ago, we looked at the liability and talked to our risk manager and said, look, we have this risk today. I mean, we'd be fooling ourselves if we thought that risk wasn't present in our workplace prior to starting this transformation program. Our failed drug screens alone told us that we had some percentage of our population that was already doing, the risk was already present. So we felt our existing, liability protections, workers' compensation, employer liability, those sorts of things, combined with our safety program and the other protocols we have in place were sufficient. So we didn't feel the need to do anything additional from a company's perspective. Now, if some sort of legislation can be introduced and passed to insulate us further, obviously that'd be welcomed. But we didn't feel that we needed to go out and purchase anything to further mitigate our risk.
And that's such a good point too, Matthew, because we have statistics that show most people with substance use disorder are gainfully employed currently. We just don't know. And that goes back to the culture that we have to ensure that our companies have a good culture where people feel comfortable coming forward, getting the help they need. And then on the other side, that you all have the help that they need, especially with success coaches and wraparound services. And before I move to Rob to see if he has anything to add, I know we're getting a lot of questions in the chat. I'm writing them down. We're going to try and get to a lot of them, especially about wraparound services. Rob, do you have anything to add to this about liability?
Yeah, I think that the way that we try to mitigate our risk is by defining if someone is in active recovery or not. And we've, obviously set up a couple of things that give us the clues to whether or not someone's in active recovery. Because if we can make sure that someone doesn't still get hurt, use drugs on the job, the likelihood of needing to even talk about liability is gone. So if we could just figure out how as businesses to establish an environment and questions and a culture to ask people about their recovery and be able to validate that, I think that most all of your risk is gone. It really is.
If I could piggyback off what Rob said, and that was another point that came out in our discussions. We said, look, these people were probably less risky than some of our existing employees because at least they are in recovery, whereas our employees who are using, they're not. So actually it's not an increased risk. If anything, they're less risky.
That's a great point. And I think that a lot of the things that people are looking at, especially as people come out of incarceration in terms of different fields based on what someone was incarcerated for. So we will continue to work for the business community to make sure that you guys have what you need to on that front as well. Then I'll pass it back to Ashley.
All right, great guys. I was gonna ask Matt a little bit about what exactly, because they were asking in the chat, what exactly you mean about wraparound services. If you could discuss that a little bit.
So, transportation, housing, steel-toed shoes, all these things that someone often needs to get started in the workforce. A lot of us think of that as just an afterthought. For someone coming out of recovery or transitioning from incarceration, that's almost can be insurmountable at times. I can share a story about a failure that we had. So before we had our success coach, we had a few people going through our program, and we had a gentleman who was doing a great job, had been with us for several weeks, and he just didn't show up one day. Try to get a hold of him, couldn't get a hold of him. Spent a couple of days trying to get a hold of him, and after 3 or 4 days, okay, well, I guess he's not coming back. And so we terminated the employment. And then finally, I don't remember the circumstances, but we did get a hold of him. Either we reached out again or he reached out to us. And he explained that he had gotten evicted from his apartment. And so he had to make the very tough choice between coming into work or staying on the sidewalk with his very few earthly possessions he had at that time. And who knows how any of us would handle that situation, but that's how he chose to handle it. And I'm not going to judge him on that decision. Had we had the success coach at the time, who Christine does a great job, I think she could have helped him navigate that situation a lot better than he did. She could say, hey, these are the things we could do. Maybe even helped him before he got evicted to prevent that situation. But as it came up, she might have helped him navigate that differently. So I think those wraparound services, again, a success coach is critical because they have access to so many things that those like people like us aren't aware of, so many programs, so many resources that can help folks. So, that's the first thing I think. That's the first wraparound service I would recommend anybody having is if you can't have a success coach dedicated or on site, try to find a partner, try to find somebody who can help you with that.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And some individuals in the chat are wondering, I know Patrick and Matthew both have success coaches, and Christine is excellent. I think she's on this call, but people are wanting to know what exactly is a success coach?
Go ahead, Patrick, please.
Okay, so for our success coach, this is someone who is very aware of all the departments, the recovery centers. Like Matt was saying earlier, they know who to put our employees into contact with. If there's a transportation, housing, even financial issues, we have employees that'll come to our success coach. They're having problems with childcare, and so this person will know. Here are some options, whether they be a local resource or a state resource or even a federal resource, to be able to point this person in the right direction to help them get the help that they need. As it relates to drug recovery, anything basically. We've recently set up through our program too. We have a rideshare program because we have found a lot of our individuals in our second chance program struggle with transportation. So we will have, hey, we've got this person living in this community. Do we have anybody else in this community that could partner with them and get them transportation? So just someone there that knows the local, state, and federal resources that they can point the person in the right direction.
Right. And I'm pretty sure I'm correct that it's not a success coach is not just for the individuals in recovery or who have been formerly incarcerated, correct? I mean,
Correct.
any of your employees, right?
Right. And every employee in the company knows who our success coach is and is able to use that resource.
Okay. And I think there's.
I was just like, she provides us with a report, and she meets with a lot of our, permanent employees, and some of them maybe in some cases more. And we wanted to do that for two reasons. Number one, those folks need help too navigating life, but it also creates some anonymity, I guess, or privacy for our transitional employment folks. If they're the only ones going in there, then it kind of isolates them and puts a spotlight on them. But if anybody can go in and meet with Christine, and that gives them a little bit of privacy and doesn't identify them as someone going through the program, because we try to maintain their privacy there and not share that with other employees.
Right. I think wraparound services are so important because I can remember when I got out of jail, when I got out of treatment, I was still homeless, and I came out of treatment and I sat down on my friend's couch and I thought, what am I going to do now? I don't have a home. I don't have a job. Luckily I had transportation, but I couldn't afford it because I didn't have a job. So these wraparound services are so important. Rob, I know you might not have a success coach, but what do you do in regards of wraparound services?
Yeah, we're so small, we can really customize all of this around the individual. For example, we have partnerships with some churches. We had a woman who has had a lot of tragedy lately watch a video that someone had coming off a break of a car on fire in front of the Hope Center the other day. Well, about 5 minutes later, she got an emergency call saying that her mechanic was trying to get a hold of her. The video that she was watching on the phone from the other employee was her car that caught on fire when the mechanic was outside of the Hope Center. And so we were able to use another community partner, and literally by 5 o'clock that day, say, is there any temporary transportation that we could have for her? And she got it by 5 o'clock that afternoon. So it's just being tapped in to try to figure out how you can help connect with the people that might offer the services in your own community and find them first, as opposed to waiting until it happens, is really kind of our attitude. So anything that we could do to wrap around, we do.
Thank you. Yeah, my friend, counterpart Jarvis Livingston said transportation programs are extremely important and necessary, even in a city like Lexington. Transportation is huge. And then Tanya, I want to ask you, what about wraparound services where you're at?
I'd say we're still in process. We of course have the EAP. I'm working with Adam Fargo on the coaching, but we have not started that up yet. So we're getting there.
Well, you are working with the right person,
Yes,
Adam Fargo, and I'm sure he's very, very helpful.
it is.
I wanted to add to that.
Go ahead, Patrick.
In addition to being there for people to come to him, he's also on a monthly basis doing lunch and learn programs, and he's addressing topics that he has seen to be, a major topic, or we've seen a lot of it in the greenhouse. And so he's doing monthly lunch and learns to help people identify these programs as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I like that. So I'm going to kind of go around. This is just a time where I want you to give advice to companies that are thinking about being fair chance or second chance or transformational, whichever word we want to use. So for those employers, those businesses, organizations that are thinking about this, what's some advice that you could give them? Let's see, I'm gonna throw you guys off here, and I'm gonna start with Tanya.
My advice would be just try it. You have to be willing to reach out to the community. Labor shortages have been issues for a long time. You're missing a whole pool of people. If you just look at, felony, I'm putting them in the no hire checkbox, or they said they are in recovery, I'm gonna put them in the no checkbox. You're missing a huge group of applicants, and it won't always work. But when it does, that employee is so extremely loyal to you. They are the ones that never miss. Their attendance is like, they don't even have an attendance file. So I'd say just try it.
Great advice. I love that, because individuals in recovery make excellent employees. And I think that's because, speaking for myself, it's like I have my purpose now. I never felt as if I had a purpose, and I have meaningful employment. It's not only my livelihood, but it's my purpose. So it's huge. Let's see, Matthew, I'm going to go to you. Any advice?
Yeah, before I do, I want to just share a story. So when we were starting this program, we were trying to convince, one of our operations managers, and he was very, again, apprehensive. And we shared kind of a story like Tanya said. It was kind of like, FYI, we won't share the name, but one of your employees is a recovering addict, and it's one of your rock stars. It's one of your best employees. You don't know who he is, but he's outperforming everybody else. And we truly believe it's because we've given him that purpose, that second chance. And he was still continues to this day to be one of our top performers. The manager still doesn't know who that is, but it's a true statement that Tanya made. What I would say is, start slow and small. And why I would say that is because there's going to be failures. And in this type of program, you're going to have those people who are just waiting to say, gotcha, or I told you this wouldn't work. So starting slow and small and having those wraparound services up front will help prevent some of that, I told you so things that can derail the program. So I think it's very important to start slow and small for that reason. But also you got to level set expectations on the front end to say, look, guys, we're going to have failures. Just like today, we have people who test positive for drug screens. We will have someone go through this program and have a regression or a relapse, I think is the right term. So you have to level set expectations from the front end, and then identify managers, identify champions who are going to be very supportive of the program, and put candidates or put participants with those managers, place them in those departments, because you will have people who are more willing to champion the program than others. And then, like I said, the last thing is just have those wraparound services, and the success coach is probably the first and most important wraparound service you can have.
Thank you, Matthew. And I was going to add to that. You said, tell me if you agree with this. You said you're going to have failures. A couple people on here have said that you're going to have failures. But don't we have failures in the general workforce?
Absolutely.
So if we think of it that way, we have failures in the general workforce. It's just that sometimes this untapped talent pool has got such a spotlight on it when we're having these failures anyway in the general workforce. So I didn't know if you would agree with that or not.
I agree 100%. And like I said earlier, when we started this, we said, hey guys, we've got this risk already. Let's not kid ourselves. And so, it's just, like I said, level setting expectations and make sure everybody's operating in reality and not some false sense of security.
Right. And Jacqueline had brought up the statistic about individuals in the workforce. It's 75% of individuals who are struggling with substance use disorder are active in the workforce. Statistic that says 66% of individuals who struggle with opioid use disorder are silently suffering in the workforce. And why are they silently suffering? A lot of it's due to stigma. So we may have no idea. You may have an employer that says, I don't have this problem, when actually they probably do. They just don't know about it. So Patrick, I'm going to go to you. What's some advice you can give?
Very similar to what Matt and Tanya said. I think one thing I can add is that, when you're recruiting and you're filling an opportunity, you're filling a role. When you hire someone from a second chance program, you're changing a life. You're really giving this person another opportunity. And this person is probably feeling down. They probably don't have a lot of confidence. I recently hired a new recruiter that is assisting me. And one of the things I had to tell her was be prepared for the number of people who will break down and start crying when you make them a job offer. You're truly changing someone's life. And it's just amazing. AppHarvest is a certified B corporation. So that means we put our purpose over our profits. And so being able to, we commit to a percentage of hiring coming from our second chance programs. But for me, it's just kind of, yes, there will be failures. You will have a lot of successes, as Matt said, and Tanya also. These people, they're going to be loyal. They're going to, during the ice storms, we had large numbers of people who just could not get to work. And some of our employees from our second chance employees were there every single day. They found a way to get to work. So for me, it's like, definitely give it a try. And the feeling you're going to get when you change someone's lives by giving them meaningful employment will make all the difference.
Yes, thank you. Very well said. Because I can remember, it's almost been 8 years for me in long-term recovery. And I cried when I got the position at the chamber, employment specialist. And then I just got promoted to director and I cried all over again. So yes, those are tears of gratitude and showing that you're being blessed, and tears of humility, being a humble individual. Rob, so any advice you could give for these employers that want to be fair chance?
Yeah, because everybody on this call is some sort of a leader in this that has the opportunity to hire people. And I kind of look at it this way. We don't really have a supply problem because there's so many people. 12% of the population has an addiction issue, right? And so it's not the supply issue that we have, it's the demand issue. So most of us are going to have to confront a corporation or a group of people that we have to convince. And for me, what helps me think about this to keep my head on straight when I either have to communicate it or if I have to keep encouraging myself is that second chance employment really is just like the Horatio Alger story, where we need to try to give opportunity to people. But we don't even realize as American businesses that we're preventing opportunity from people that have made a mistake or coming from generational poverty or from incarceration. And I believe it's our obligation in business to try to figure out how to say yes to people to help them up. Because if not, we're going to have the same issues over and over generationally by keeping the people that don't have down. And it's crazy to think that when we talk about implicit bias as it relates to race, we have so much bias and systematic elimination of people that are disadvantaged in the employment area that we have no idea what we're doing. It's so ingrained in what we do. And all I'm asking everybody to think about is, as a larger issue, this is socially such an important piece for our businesses to be one small little piece of trying to help someone get from the bottom to the top.
That's
Thank
such a
you so
fantastic
much.
job. And I know we've had a couple more questions in the chat. We're going to go ahead and wrap our discussion up today. I know that we've got some time, some people who need to hop off and things along those lines, but I want to go ahead and remind everybody about Kentucky Comeback. All of the people you see on this call today, their companies are Fair Chance Employers, which is part of our site. Ashley provides training for companies, so we love for you all to get involved. I love to see all the stuff going on in the chat, you guys answering each other's questions. That's also kind of the community we hope to provide through this initiative. So please become a part of the Kentucky Comeback program at KentuckyComeback.com. I also want to talk, I saw a question about wraparound services and cost to employers. I want to talk about a legislation that passed this General Assembly, which is Recovery Ready Communities. That's House Bill 7. With that legislation coming up, a lot of your communities will be taking inventory of what you have in your communities and actually helping with recovery, focusing on prevention, recovery, treatment, all of these things. So local communities are going to be getting even more involved. We've seen a lot more positive changes throughout the last year. So again, all of that information is also on KentuckyComeback.com, but we really appreciate all of the people on this call, our panelists who have participated today, as well as all of you who have tuned in and who want to be a part of this conversation, who want to make this kind of positive change. So we want to thank all of our panelists, our wonderful panelists, and just for anybody's knowledge, this has been recorded. We will be posting it. We'll send out a follow-up email. I know that somebody even asked for the contact information of each panelist so that maybe they can take tours. So we'll get with you guys, and in a follow-up email to all participants, we will have that information. So I want to thank everyone again so much. Please reach out to Ashley or myself. Our information is on the Comeback website as well as the Kentucky Chamber website. And we look forward to seeing the progress that this state can continue to make. So thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you guys. Thank you so much for what you do.